Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the life of a true 17th century mastermind. We're breaking down the historical triumphs of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and, really translating his legendary life into an actionable modern tactical playbook. Because honestly, this isn't just history. It's a total masterclass in strategy, leadership, and just incredible resilience. So let's open up the playbook.
We're starting off with this really profound realization from when he was just a teenage boy. Growing up, Shivaji saw that his people, the Marathas, were basically known as servants to foreign rulers. But he had this spark, right? He realized this servitude was purely psychological. He completely understood that slavery is, at its core, a state of mind. You're really only a captive if your mindset allows it. And so his entire life's mission basically became breaking that exact mindset.
So here's our playbook for today. We're looking at 6 distinct pillars: breaking the slavery mindset, mastering guerrilla warfare, strategic leverage, the ultimate scenario analysis, the art of bouncing back, and finally,
All right, jumping right into section 1, breaking the slavery mindset, the catalyst of Swaraj. Born in 1630, Shivaji grew up completely immersed in the epic stories of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, which were taught to him by his mother, Jizabai. And he actually applied that inherent leadership incredibly early, around the age of 12 to 15, out in the forests of Naval near modern-day Pune. He looked around and noticed the poor, backward youth of the area had just immense raw courage, but they were essentially unguided missiles. So what does he do? He gathers them together, explains that their servitude to these massive empires was literally just a mental block, and he unified them. They even took a blood oath to establish Swaraj, absolute self-rule. It's actually a perfect historical example of modern team building, taking raw, untapped potential and turning it into a highly motivated movement from scratch.
moving on to section 2, mastering guerrilla warfare or agility over size. So how exactly do you fight massive empires when you've got a small team and practically zero funds? Well, he didn't fight conventionally because he simply couldn't afford to.
He relied heavily on ganimi kawa. It's this absolutely brilliant form of guerrilla warfare that combines the enemy's own weight against them with just absolute deception. He blended sheer, brute physical bravery with incredibly sharp intellectual astuteness. In fact, his forces were sometimes called mountain rats because they used the mountainous terrain to their absolute advantage. They'd strike swiftly out of nowhere, completely disorient and exhaust these far larger, heavily armed forces, and then, boom, vanish right back into the hills. But the thing is, he didn't just limit himself to the mountains. He practiced what we would totally call portfolio diversification today. Realizing he needed parallel leadership and, alternative strengths, he actually looked to the ocean. Along the entire Konkan coastline, he built up a massively powerful marine force. This kind of incredible strategic foresight is exactly why today he is famously, and very proudly, known as the father of the Indian Navy. Okay, section 3, strategic leverage and alliances, winning without fighting. Because sometimes the absolute greatest victories require zero violence whatsoever. Check this out. When the dictator Adil Shah imprisoned Shivaji's father, basically to cripple his movement, a lesser leader would have just rushed into some emotional, doomed battle, right? Instead, Shivaji steps back and looks at the broader political chessboard. It was a masterstroke of stakeholder management. He actually reached out to the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan up in Delhi and promised him future military support in the north if Shah Jahan used his influence to pressure Adil Shah. And it worked flawlessly. His father was released, Shivaji forced to surrender before a single sword was ever drawn, literally by making his enemy's rivals do the heavy lifting for him. Which brings us to section 4, the ultimate scenario analysis, the Afzal Khan encounter. Let's dive into what is arguably one of history's tensest, highest-stakes meetings. So Adil Shah was getting pretty frustrated with Shivaji's rapid rise, so he sends his chief general, this absolute giant of a man named Afzal Khan, to eliminate him. Khan proposes an unarmed one-on-one peace meeting. Now what followed is literally a masterclass in scenario analysis. For Plan A, Shivaji agrees to the unarmed meeting. Sure, sounds good. But he prepared for the absolute worst case. For Plan B, if a betrayal happened, he secretly wore an impenetrable steel armor jacket right under his clothes. And for Plan C, if he actually needed to fight back, he concealed a deadly little weapon called the Bognak, or tiger claws, right inside his hand. So it's complete compliance on the surface, but absolute lethal preparation underneath. And no surprise, betrayal is exactly what happened. Afzal Khan, who, remember, is like 2.5 times Shivaji's size, goes in for an embrace, pulls a dagger, and tries to stab Shivaji right in the back. But the hidden steel armor completely repelled the blade. In a flash, Shivaji uses those tiger claws to completely neutralize the giant general. But here's the real strategic genius. He doesn't just stop there. He instantly capitalized on the shattered morale of the enemy army, and he captured the massive Pratapgarh fort within just 18 days. I mean, that is just absolute flawless execution. All right, Section 5, the art of bouncing back. Resilience in defeat. Because, let's be real, even master strategists face massive setbacks sometimes. The Mughals eventually allied with a very powerful leader, Mirza Raja Jai Singh, who defeated Shivaji in a major campaign. And under the resulting Treaty of Purandar, Shivaji suffered a really devastating defeat. He was forced to surrender 23 of his highly prized forts. I mean, it was a totally crushing blow. But the real lesson for us here is his reaction to it. He utterly refused to let this massive failure dictate his mental state. He didn't sit back, he didn't mourn the loss. He immediately, and I mean immediately, began his relentless comeback campaign. 360. He didn't just try to rebuild what he lost. In the years that followed this incredible bounce back, he relentlessly campaigned and captured over 360 forts. He literally turned a massive, humiliating defeat into the very foundation of an empire that ended up stretching from the south all the way up to Gujarat. Talk about a comeback.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, a legacy of ethical leadership, or values over victory. Because, you see, you really can't build an enduring empire just on tactics alone. You need a bedrock of solid values to earn the absolute fanatical loyalty of your team.
Now, at a time when invading armies routinely engaged in just horrific acts of plundering, Shivaji instituted a strict, unbreakable code of conduct for his army. The rules were clear. There was to be absolute protection of women and children. There was zero tolerance for the destruction of any religious sites. And if any soldier was caught violating these rules, the punishment was extremely swift and severe. He basically took those noble values he learned in his childhood and instilled them directly into the DNA of his military.
And actually, this brings up a super vital historical clarification. It is essential to understand that his fight was purely against foreign oppression. It was never against a religion. He fought the foreign invaders who had turned his people into servants, plain and simple. And because of this deeply secular, honorable stance, many of his most trusted army generals, his close friends, his chief advisors, and even his gurus were actually Muslims. People respected his unwavering ethics so much that they were literally willing to lay down their lives for him.
So, as we wrap up this explainer today, we've seen how a teenage boy used mindset, scenario analysis, strategic leverage, and just unyielding ethics to build an empire practically out of nothing. But as we know, history is really only as good as its application today. So I want to leave you with this thought. How will you apply this 17th century scenario analysis and incredible resilience to the modern challenges that you are facing right now? Seriously, think about it. See you next time.